Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and this is going to be my Demonology Warlocks Shadowlands overview video, I suppose. Now, this is going to be video 1 of 3 in a series covering Demonology, Destruction, and then most likely Affliction, probably in that order. In it, we're going to be covering talents, baseline spell changes, legendaries, covenants, abilities, toolkits, and just how the spec feels currently in Shadowlands beta, I can say now. Now, once again, if you guys are interested in seeing any of the Destro or AF videos that will come after this, feel free to hit that subscribe button now and come back to the channel when those are up. So, I have been in Shadowlands Alpha since the very first wave went out, and I feel at this point I have a pretty good overall feel for how Warlock is. Raid testing did begin last week. We tested 4 total bosses, and I can safely say that Destro and AF do feel good, but so does Demonology. However, Demonology does have a few issues that need to be addressed, and I feel that it is probably the most, I guess, lackluster of all 3 specs currently for a few reasons heading into the later stages of beta. So, before we get too far into that, all the weak auras, profiles, add-ons you see here are indeed available to you for free on my Twitch if you want to swing by and grab them anytime. I have been updating a handful of weak auras and things for beta. However, most weak auras from live do work as well, but regardless, they're both available too. They're for free if you want to come by and grab them. So, without further ado, let's get into this video and talk all about Demonology Warlocks in Shadowlands. Okay, so I thought the best way to start this video off is just to go over Demonology's baseline spells. This is without taking any talents. I suppose we have a handful here that are pre-selected for us, but the baseline spells and abilities that have changed for Demonology as a whole. So the number one thing here is that Demonology, Destro, and AF all do indeed have corruption. The difference between Affliction's corruption, however, is that Demonology and Destro have a cast time on it. Now, realistically, this is grotesquely undertuned at this point from what we've seen, and I don't really think we'll be casting it in any scenario. I'll agree with you. I hope we aren't if it has a cast time, but we'll see how things go in the long run. I would imagine the only world this is cast in is if it is buffed considerably, and also we have some kind of council-based fight where we're playing Demonology, but I don't know why we would be doing that in the first place. So, 4 curses have also been added for Warlocks. Curse of Exhaustion, which recently has been added, replacing Curse of Doom, thankfully. Recklessness, Tongues, and Weakness. Now, currently, Recklessness and Weakness are the 2 effects that can be applied to bosses, which essentially means you're going to want bare minimum 1 Warlock in the raid to put Recklessness on the boss, thus having him take 5% increased physical damage. Weakness can also be applied to bosses to slow melee attacks if need be. However, for the most part, you're probably just going to have a Wreck Warlock, and then I guess maybe we'll see how the rest of it goes. Demonic Circle has also gone baseline for Warlocks. It was a talent in this spot here. However, it was replaced with Howl of Terror. So we have both of these baseline, which is a huge quality of life improvement. Fel Domination has made its return from, I guess, the classic era of WoW. Now, this does not necessarily really fix the issue of 6-second pet summons being a thing. While it does sort of help in certain spots where your pet dies in raid testing, or you just need to get it out fast if you die, it helps. But the issue is, Fel Domination has a 3-minute cooldown. So if you're trying to twist out multiple pets in Mythic Plus, and let's be real here, as far as Demonology goes, you're mainly only playing your Felguard, but if for some reason you're trying to get out your Imp, your Voidwalker, Succubus, or Fel Hunter, you can Fel Domination it out for a quick pet, but then once you do, you're stuck with your 6-second summon again on your Felguard. Now, personally, I had my Felguard die in raid testing last week, and it felt terrible, because he died a minute beforehand. I used Fel Dom to get him out, and, well, that was a nightmare. So I don't know why this change was made. I imagine it probably has to do with PvP a bit, but I really, if that's the case, I would just love it to be a thing in PvP and leave it as a 2.5-ish second cast time like we have on live servers. Moving on here to Demonology's actual spells here. Basically, everything here is pretty much the same toolkit-wise as we have on live as far as raw spells go. However, there are a few different ranks of spells that have been added in Shadowlands in an attempt to sort of make it seem like leveling and levels matter. Obviously, we're going to push to 60 quickly, but it's cool learning new abilities and things along the way. So, at level 52, we have rank 2 of Summon Demonic Tyrant. This is the Baleful Invocation trait, well, half of it from live, the more effective part. The trait on live currently buffs your Demonic Tyrant's Demon Fire damage by a certain amount, while also having it instantly generate you 5 Soul Shards. Now, Before this was implemented in beta, it was given to us about midway through alpha, I suppose. It wasn't in the initial build. Demonology felt, I hate using the word clunky, but it felt a lot slower, because coming from playing on live, setting up your tyrant with demonic consumption, or just in general, and then once you cast it, having those 5 shards to fuel Hand of Gul'dan, to fuel more Dreadstalker cast. It felt really smooth, but on beta, it felt like we were lacking a bit. Now, every class feels a bit lacking because haste is not really a thing at 6% here, or I guess technically it's the 50 character. But at max level, we're in blues at 6% haste. However, adding in Baleful Invocation goes a long way for Demonology's damage profile. In Mythic Plus, in rating, basically everywhere. We're going to get to some demonic consumption changes in a bit here, but regardless, having the ability to fuel a Hand of Gul'dan, a Call of Dreadstalkers cast right after summoning your tyrant, gives you an incredibly strong burst window on a 1.5 CD. So that is learned at level 52. We do have baseline demonic tyrant obviously early on, but it further amplifies your tyrant. At level 54, we learn Call of Dreadstalkers rank 2, which reduces the cast time of Call of Dreadstalkers by 0.5 seconds and teaches you, your Dreadstalkers, how to pursue targets faster. Essentially, they'll jump at the target if they're more than 10 yards away. It's nice, more or less from what I've seen here. The bigger part of this is the half-second cast time reduction, but hey, it's nice. The final ability we have here is Fell Firebolt, rank 2, learned at 56. Teaches your wild imps how to spend 20% less energy when casting Fell Firebolt. So, the way your imps work is that whenever you cast a Hand of Gul'dan, you summon X amount of imps for however many shards you put into it. And the amount of time they're active as long as they're in combat is based off how much energy they expend. When they run out of energy, meaning whenever they cast all their firebolts, because each firebolt cast takes a certain amount of energy, they expire. So this essentially gives you an extra firebolt cast or so, I imagine. I mean, just looking at a baseline here. So it's nice. I'll be real with you, I didn't really realize all 3 of these things were actually leveling talents until a few days ago, because most characters are template characters, level 60 at this point in beta. But these 3 changes are really nice as far as the baseline toolkit for Demonology goes. They're going to help a lot. So let's get into a few talent changes here and really start diving into what Demonology is. Okay, so when we start to look at talents for Demonology Warlocks, there's not really any new ones here. However, a handful of them have received some changes that can make them a bit more competitive depending on where you're at. The first row here, you might notice that Demonic Strength has been moved to this slot from this slot. On live, Strength is in the middle and Bombers is over here. I don't know why they moved this. It might be an attempt to make like certain trees more passive and like a middle ground versus longer cooldown. I don't really know. They're all the same, essentially. In the 25 row, however, Demonic Calling has been changed. Shadowbolt and Demon Bolt have a 20% chance to make your next call Dreadstalkers cost 2 fewer soul shards and have no cast time. So the difference between this Demonic Calling and the Demonic Calling on live is that in BFA, Demonic Calling makes your call Dreadstalkers cost 1 less soul shard, not 2. Now baseline, your call Dreadstalkers cost 2 soul shards. So essentially this makes, whenever it procs, which is a good bit of the time because your filler is Shadowbolt or Demon Bolt procs, your Dreadstalkers are essentially free, and they have no cast time. So, now the cast time change is not new, but this has always been a spell that gives you a little bit of extra added mobility as far as Demonology is concerned, but netting that extra shard is nice. There is a bit of anti-synergy here, however, with a handful of Legendaries that we're going to get to in a bit, so we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get there. The second talent here, Power Siphon, is similar to live, but also different. You instantly sacrifice up to 2 wild imps, generating 2 charges of Demonic Core that cause Demon Bolt to deal 30% additional damage. Now, Demonic Core is instant cast Demon Bolt, which you get whenever your called Dreadstalkers expire, or randomly sometimes when pets expire in general. So there are also a 1 or 2 Legendaries, I believe, that have a stacking Demon Bolt damage bonus, which does sort of stack with Power Siphon, but for the most part, Demonic Calling adds an incredible amount of utility and saves you 2 soul shards in every scenario when it procs, which, like I said, is a good bit of the time. It has a pretty long duration on the actual buff, which grants you the instant cast dogs, and like I said, for the most part, you're casting a lot of Shadow Bolts and Demon Bolts. Now, Doom in this row, this was improved Doom when we had Curse of Doom. However, Curse of Doom was removed, and we are back to Doom. Doom, unfortunately, is just in a weird spot it's been in a weird spot for a long time. And an interesting thing here that I just noticed and forgot that it had changed when this was reintroduced and the talent was changed, they actually removed the clause of if Doom kills the target, it summons a Doom Guard. Now, the chances of that happening were lower than me winning the lottery 10 times in a row. It's never going to happen. You had to literally be the one person to land the killing blow on a mob, and it wasn't through any spell. Doom had to be the killing blow on a mob, which has a 17.6 second duration, ticks one time. It's never going to happen. So essentially it's the same as it was before. The 30 row is the same. They did buff Dark Pack's shield scaling a bit, I believe, with spell power to like absorb more damage, but for the most part this is the same row here. The 35 row is also the same. You have from the Shadow, Soul Strike, Vile Fiend. Howl of Terror is I guess a returning talent. Once as mentioned a few minutes ago, Demonic Circle was in this spot. Howl of Terror has a 1.3 second cast, so more often than not I feel we're probably going to be taking Mortal Coil here just because of the shorter CD, the in-cap that it offers, and hey, a 20% heal is pretty relevant. It does heal even if it doesn't in-cap things. So the 45 row here, Inner Demons has been buffed. I believe they buffed Inner Demons and Nether Portal's actual demons they spawn by 21%. I think I have notes here somewhere. Yeah, their attack power was buffed by 21%. So it does add value to these abilities here. However, I feel personally right now with changes to demonic consumption that we're going to get to in a few minutes, that Grimoire Felguard is probably going to be your choice in basically every setting because of the changes to consumption. So Soul Conduit is the same thing. It's been here for multiple expansions. It's a boring talent, but it gives you a 15% chance to refund every soul shard you spend. 50 row here, Sack Souls is the same. Nothing has changed here. Demonic Consumption is probably the talent that's received the most changes. So currently on live, Demonic Consumption, your Demonic Commander's power amp from this talent is based off the number of imps that it consumes. It will actually suck them up and kill them, essentially buffing itself damage-wise. Now, that is one of the reasons as to why LOSing imps and things, Mythic Plus and rating, wherever, is huge. Because, like we talked about a few minutes ago, your imp's energy is based off how many Firebolt casts they get off. Each Firebolt on live, I believe, costs 20 energy. They get off 5 casts. But the thing with Demonic Consumption, it's not just based off the amount of imps, it's based off how much energy they have when consumed, which is why LOSing is so important. They don't cast spells, they essentially run into melee with a full energy bar, and by the time they all get there and start casting, you've summoned 3 or 4 more waves of imps, and you suck them all up at full power, and your Tyrant deals more damage in 10 seconds than you as a player will deal in 10 minutes. That is why it is incredibly OP on live. However, it has been overhauled in Shadowlands to a different kind of demonic consumption, more similar to Thalkael's consumption from Legion. Your Demonic Commander now drains 15% of the life from your demon servants to empower himself. So this does count our baseline Felguard, our Grimoire Felguard if we take it, our Vile Fiend, our Call Dreadstalkers, and every wild imp that we have. This adds a tremendous amount of value to Grimoire Felguard, and also adds value to Summon Vile Fiend, because we play Soul Strike everywhere on live, and we play Soul Conduit basically everywhere on live. Overall, I am a fan of this change. I do think that it fits the toolkit of Demonology a lot better. For the most part, when playing BFA, we don't care if our Called Dreadstalkers are extended or any other pet for that reason. All we care about is getting the max amount of imps into a Demonic Consumption Tyrant setup. So this change, I feel overall, will be good in the long run for Demonology as a whole. Now, when it comes to Legendaries for Demonology in Shadowlands, I have to say I feel that Demo overall has gotten the short end of the stick for the most part. It's not that the Legendary effects aren't powerful, it's just that they're nowhere near, I feel, as powerful as Destruction ones or Affliction ones. Affliction has Wrath of Consumption and Corruption Slow Ring returning. Destruction has a minute-and-a-half Infernals and triple Conflag reduced CD charges, and Demonology has increased Demon Bolt damage and things, which make up 3% of our damage as a whole. So what we're going to do here is go over all the Demonology Legendary options, and then give a bit of feedback on each one as to what I think could improve them potentially. So now, we have a total of 16 Legendaries. We have 4 for each spec, meaning 12 are spec specific, and we have 4 generic legendaries that can be worn for whatever spec you're playing. So let's get right into this. The first one here we have is Demonic Gateway is now instant cast, and your first use on Gateway does not trigger the cooldown. So basically, it is Portal Pants from Legion. Gateway is instant, you pop it, you can use it again. Basically that. Now, Legendary is cool. It might have a lot more use in PvP and things than PvE. It was used a lot in Mythic Plus in Legion. However, that's when gear swapping was still a thing, which I wish would come back in Mythic Plus. However, with that being the case, I don't really know how much play this is going to see as a whole, but it is a cool overall like generic effect to see coming back in Shadowlands. I'm happy with it as a whole. It's pretty cool. The second one here we have is Drain Life now deals damage and restores health 50% faster. There's no interaction here with getting more Drain Life ticks. It quite literally just drains life 50% faster and heals 50% faster. So if you need a spot heal, there you go. Not very impactful. I don't think I'll really be wearing this in many spots as Demonology. The third legendary we have here says Call Dreadstalkers has a 25% chance to refund all soul shards spent. Now, this legendary, it's even on a pair of shoulders. This reminds me a lot of Recurrent Ritual from Legion. I really wish this effect was just Recurrent Ritual. It's one of the iconic abilities from Legion, and it would go a long way in fixing this issue. So we'll read this again. Call Dreadstalkers has a 25% chance to refund all soul shards spent. Let's go read Demonic Calling. Your Call Dreadstalkers cost no soul shards. They don't cost even one. They're free. And there's no like weird wording here. We've tested it a bunch. The game, it appears, does indeed check how many shards you spent casting your Called Dreadstalkers with this legendary. It's not like, okay, well, you still get 1 or 2 back. You get 0 with Demonic Calling. There is a huge amount of anti-synergy here. So I think a very easy way to address this is just make this Recurrent Ritual. Called Dreadstalkers refunds 2 soul shards. It makes Demonic Calling procs shard builders, which is what it was in Legion, and it was great. Everybody loved Recurrent Ritual. It was awesome. A great legendary. I think it's a great change. Regardless, the anti-synergy here needs to be addressed because Demonic Calling is a very strong ability for Demonology Warlocks. Number 4. This is the last generic legendary we have here. Every soul shard you spend reduces the cooldown of Summon Demonic Tyrant by 0.3 seconds. So you're probably thinking here, this is very similar to CD reduction-wise to what? Vision of Perfection, like we have on live right now. It is. But the issue is the CD reduction is not enough. We've done multiple iterations on a dummy going through an entire Tyrant cooldown sequence. It gives us about 1:20 Tyrant. So it shaves about 10 seconds off of the overall CD. Now, I think this could pretty safely be buffed to probably 0.5 seconds per soul shard spent. Technically, it was 1:18 for our Tyrant cooldown, which means each 0.1 second reduction is about 4 seconds overall. So buffing it to 0.5 would give us about a 1:10 Tyrant. Now, that is a bit longer than we have VOP-wise on live right now. However, it's also important to keep in mind that this legendary effect will become more powerful with higher levels of haste because you're casting Shadow Bolt faster. You're casting every spell faster, so you're spending shards faster. So I get why the tuning on this is maybe a bit lower than it should be, but also relatively precise. You don't normally see 0.3 second CD reductions, but you have to keep that haste in mind. Now, we're not playing with explosive potential anymore. That Azurite trait is gone, and that legendary, which we'll get to here in a minute, is not very good. Well, sort of is and isn't, but it's still important to keep that in mind. So I would rather see this be a 0.5 second reduction or even 0.6. You can get away with that pretty easily too, I think, early on. And then if it needs to be tuned later as we progress through Shadowlands and patches and things, do that. But I would much rather have it be a decent legendary choice early on, because this is one of the 4 generic ones. This also reduces the cooldown on Infernal and Dark Glare. And I would rather have this be good than early on and have it nerfed than just be subpar most of the expansion. This is Wilfred's Sigil. This is the legendary effect that everybody wanted for Demonology from Legion. However, it's grossly undertuned right now, I feel personally. Moving on to the 4 Demonology-specific legendaries we have here. Let's find these. The first one here. When Implosion damages at least 3 targets, you gain 5% haste for 8 seconds for each imp imploded. So this is Explosive Potential. However, the effect is called Implosive Potential. It is different. On live currently in BFA, you have to implode 3 imps. It doesn't matter how many targets you hit, and they buff your haste by X value. It's not baseline percent, but it's there. The other difference is that it is for 15 seconds and not 8 seconds. Now, this legendary needs to hit 3 targets. From what I've seen, it doesn't matter how many imps you implode, as long as you just implode them. Implode a imp. It's fine. I could be wrong there, but regardless, your implosion is normally 6 to 9 imps, and you go from there. So, the thing here is that this legendary effect is extremely strong when it's relevant on trash or bosses that are stacked. And I mean, to be fair, you don't really have bosses with three or more targets active for a while, but when you can get the value out of this legendary, it's strong, because you're normally imploding 6-ish imps, a 30% haste buff. However, it's only for 8 seconds. It's quite literally half the duration of explosive potential, and when you have a single target boss, it is a dead legendary. It is a dead legendary, and having that early on into Shadowlands, even it's like mid first tier, it's not where you want to be. So now I would love a reversion to what explosive potential is on live right now, but I don't know if we'll get that, because this sort of feels like the version of EP that Blizzard sort of, well, wanted to go with. And they just sort of left EP in its current form on live because it was already sort of there. So this legendary is super hit or miss. For me as a whole, I don't like the idea of playing a dead legendary, seeing as what extra value you get from playing relevant legendaries. I'm not super excited about this legendary. I think the duration of the actual haste buff could very well be extended. And keep in mind that with demonic consumption, you aren't consuming your pets anymore. So if you have 2 waves of imps out with other pets in general, it will extend those imps. And then you have Baleful baked into your Tyrant baseline, so you can get 9, 12-ish imps out and then implode for a, 60 or 75% haste buff. You can do it, but once again, how often can you do it if you have 1 or 2 targets? So this is very hit or miss. I think it's very close, but overall misses the mark a little bit. Second legendary we have here, Shadow Bolt increases the damage of your next Demon Bolt by 25%, stacking up to 4 times. So the issue with this legendary, a 100% increase to any ability is a substantial increase, and this does indeed stack with Power Siphon, with the Power Siphon additional bonus damage to Demon Bolt. However, even with that being the case, we don't cast a tremendous amount of Demon Bolts. We never hard cast one except if it's pre-pull to get 2 shards instead of 1. You'll cast them off Demonic Core procs, and with Power Siphon, if you're playing it, whether you are or aren't, you're only casting them off of Demonic Core procs, right? The thing is, outside of like weird Power Siphon, huge Demon Bolt builds, Demon Bolt damage is about the same as Shadow Bolt for me, because Shadow Bolt is our filler. It makes up 3, 4, 5% of our damage, so even a 100% damage amp to Demon Bolt, I don't think is extremely impactful. This is nowhere near as impactful as other legendaries are for certain specs, and I get power levels vary, but I think this is just really undertuned and probably misses the mark a little bit. I don't really see any scenario where I would want this, because even single target wise, there's no execute damage amp on Deathbolt. There's no weird like caveat like Drain Soul execute with Decimating Bolt and that legendary. This is just a Demon Bolt damage amp, which is sort of odd. So, third legendary we have here. This is, I forgot what it's called. Something of the Horned Nightmare. It's actually this one here. We'll come back to this. Hand of Gul'dan has a 15% chance to cast a second time on your target for free. This legendary, I feel, is probably the most impactful, the best one we have for Demonology right now. Now, there's a lot of questions that were surrounding this legendary when it first came out. Yes, it spawns. The number of imps you spawn from this legendary is based off how many shards you put into the initial Hand of Gul'dan. If you put 3 in there, you'll get 3 from that actual cast, plus if it's procs, you'll get 3 more. If you put 2, you'll get 2. If you put 1, you'll get 1. It does also deal the same impact damage as the initial, like, Hand of Gul'dan cast. The damage is the same, the imps are the same, the actual imp damage is the same. The only difference I can see so far, there's no actual visual effect on this. Now, that's probably going to be real, probably just an oversight or something that's not actually been implemented yet. I imagine there probably will be, but this legendary I feel is most valuable for a lot of reasons. First of all, larger implosion cycles, I should say. more imps, just more damage as a whole. But also, if you get procs when you're setting up your Tyrant for demonic consumption, if both of your Hand of Gul'dans or however many you cast, because sequencing is a bit different, which we'll get to in a little bit here, the extra health those 3, 5, 6, whatever imps have is relevant. It will make your Tyrant larger. It sort of feels a bit like how Demonic Meteor or Soul Conduit is on live with extra shard refunds. It gives you that it just increases the overall potential like damage ceiling depending on procs. Now, it is RNG, but I will say it's not a crazy amount of RNG. It's not to that point where it's incredibly frustrating, like having Supremacy for 1.5 minutes as Destruction, or having it for half a minute and getting no procs at all. I don't mind this RNG. I think overall this is the most impactful legendary for Demonology. However, we have one more left. So the final one we have here, each soul shard spent on Hand of Gul'dan increases the damage of your next called Dreadstalkers by 3%. Once again, I just feel this is a bit underwhelming. There is an internal cap to this. I believe the damage cap is 75% to your called Dreadstalkers. We ended up hitting a dummy and just going Hand of Gul'dan Shadowbolt sequencing for, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then it should have greatly exceeded 75% bonus damage. It might even be less than that, but we cast our Dreadstalkers and they were buffed to a max amount. We tried it multiple times. You can't exceed X amount. It's nothing to write home about. You can't, cast Hand of Gul'dan Shadowbolt for 1.5 hours, then go one-shot a boss. I wasn't overall extremely impressed with Legendary. There is a bit of like interaction here with Dreadlash, but let's be real, you're not taking Dreadlash, and I don't feel any scenario over Bombers or Demonic Strength at all. I mean, Demonic Strength is a 1 minute CD, and our Tyrant is back to 1 minute 30, but still, like, Bombers is also very strong. I just don't think this Legendary is very impactful. This Legendary here, as well as these two, they just sort of feel like tier bonuses, which I believe one of them actually was. I think this one was Antorus. They feel like tier bonuses. The effects are cool and they're powerful, but I don't know if it constitutes a legendary. This feels a bit more legendary. Having 1.5 minute Infernal, that feels legendary. Having Explosive Potential baked in, that feels like a legendary. I don't love these two effects. I think they're pretty underwhelming. So hopefully there will be some kind of revisions to these, but I'm not really sure what they want to do with these. At this point, if we're going to see changes to these, it might just be worth changing the effect overall completely, but at this point, we have to just wait and see. Some legendary effects will indeed be better than others, just like they were in Legion. Moving on to Covenant abilities for Demonology Warlock, the first thing I want to talk about here is Decimating Bolt, which is the Maldraxxus Necrolord ability. It has a 2.5 second cast on a 45 second CD, and it hurls a bolt of decimating magic at your target, dealing X amount of damage, and increasing the damage of your next 3 shadow bolts by 200%. Now, the lower the target is on health, the more damage the larger the damage increase you get is. Basically up to 400% with hitting a mob at, I don't know, 1-2%. So it does have a pseudo execute clause baked into it. However, affecting Shadow Bolt for Demonology is just not, I feel, anywhere near as impactful as Incinerate for Destruction, or Drain Soul, or Shadow Bolt for Affliction. It affects Drain Soul for Affliction as well, which has a execute clause baked into it. Shadow Bolt doesn't really have any kind of talent interaction outside of Sack Souls, but Sack Souls is just not very good, and Demonic Consumption is great everywhere. I think this ability would be better. It would make this Covenant a bit more competitive and impactful if it increased the damage of, I don't know, maybe say your next 3 imps or Hand of Gul'dan casts by a bit. Now, obviously, they have to be really precise and with tuning there, because increasing the damage of an ability like Hand of Gul'dan is a lot, but I think it would fit Demonology's toolkit pretty well, because right now, Shadow Bolt damage is not a large portion of our damage, and I just don't think it makes this an extremely competitive ability. The second Covenant that I want to talk about here is the Night Fae Ardenweald Covenant, which brings the Soul Rot ability. It has a 1.5 second cast on a 1 minute cooldown that withers away all life force of your current target and up to 3 additional targets nearby, causing to suffer a bit of nature damage over 8 seconds. However, for the next 8 seconds, casting Drain Life will cause you to also drain life from any enemy affected by your Soul Rot, which is the dot that it applies, and Drain Life will not consume any mana. It does, however, consume 20% of your maximum health when cast. Now, Unlike Affliction, Demonology does not have any way to buff drain life's damage, so while it is an awesome, probably my favorite ability overall for each Covenant, just thematically, it looks awesome too. Well, it might be really cool that way. Damage-wise, I don't think it's extremely impactful, and I think you're probably just in a better spot playing, I guess, other Covenants at this point, seeing as what they bring to Demonology's toolkit as a whole. There is a bit of on-demand burst damage, I guess, when it comes to Mythic Plus if you're playing this ability, but like I said, I think other Covenants just fit the toolkit overall better. The third Covenant we have here is the Revendreth Venthyr one, which brings the Impending Catastrophe ability with it. It's a 1-minute cooldown that calls forth a cloud of chaotic anima that travels to the target enemy, dealing X spell power shadow damage to enemies in its path. When the anima reaches the target, however, it explodes, inflicting either Curse of Weakness or Curse of Tongues, and dealing 261 spell power damage. Basically, it applies a dot to all enemies within that initial enemy's, I guess, range. It's like a sort of an explosion, sort of like a living bomb kind of effect there. The cool thing about this ability is that Curse of Weakness and Curse of Tongues do indeed bring a good bit of utility to Mythic Plus or mobs where this effect is applicable. The unfortunate part, though, is that it does not smart curse, meaning I've seen it apply weakness to casters, I've seen it apply tongues to melee mobs. A few weeks ago, it applied Curse of Weakness to a caster mid-greater heal cast. So I think it would go a long way to improving Venthyr Impending Catastrophe's overall utility if they were to make this smart curse, apply weakness to melee mobs and tongues to casters. I already feel this is one of the more competitive Covenants due to a few soul binds for Demonology. There is one that increases your versatility by 10% whenever you cast this spell, and all party members by 4%, but that's sort of getting into Conduit soulbind territory, which we don't have everything for yet, so I want to stay away from that. The dot that it brings is impactful. A 1-minute cooldown is relevant, so this is sort of potentially like the frontrunner I maybe feel for Demonology and Mythic Plus right now. But there's one more that also brings a decent bit of usefulness to its toolkit. And the final ability that I want to talk to you guys about is the Kyrian Bastion-based Covenant ability. It's called Scouring Tide with a 2-second cast and a 40-second cooldown. It deals arcane damage instantly and X spell power damage over 18 seconds. So it basically deals impact damage and also has a dot effect tied to it. If the enemy dies while affected by Scouring Tide, you generate 5 soul shards. If they survive, however, Scouring Tide's cooldown is refreshed. Basically, it comes off cooldown, you can cast it again. The wording is odd there. So it's sort of like a Shadow Burn meets Baleful Invocation with a dot kind of effect. Now, I think this ability has some hidden potential for Demonology in Mythic Plus due to how it generates 5 soul shards for you. And also with, Maldraxxus, Decimating Bolt, not being anywhere near as impactful in Mythic Plus as it is for Destro and Affliction. The issue, or the thing that I'm curious about here, though, is that generating soul shards for Demonology is not extremely challenging in the first place. You cast a Shadow Bolt, and you generate a shard. It is the spec that is the best at generating shards, the fastest out of Destruction and Affliction. So I think if you can use this ability to head into the next trash pack, say, snipe a mob at low health, get your 5 shards back, and head in with 5 shards, being able to go hand-hand Tyrant, or some kind of sequencing like that, it could prove valuable, powerful, but it's just sort of hard to tell outside of getting in game and playing with it. I do think the Venthyr Impending Catastrophe dot's also very good, and depending on what they do with the Maldraxxus one, that could be impactful as well. The Soul Rot one is awesome. I think it looks cool, but I don't think it's very powerful in Plus. So I sort of have my fingers crossed for Scouring Tide to actually see some play, because if it does, I feel like Demonology could very well be that place. As far as the rotation goes for Demonology in Shadowlands, it's similar to the way it plays in BFA, but also a bit different, and that's mainly due to demonic consumption. Now, I'm going to say this is beta, this is probably not the optimal rotation and things. This has more or less been what I've been following for raid testing in Mythic Plus when we have all our CDs lined up and things like that. Now, one point that I do want to draw attention to, which I've given plenty of feedback on, is that Grimoire Felguard is still a 2-minute CD. I think it should be a 1.5 minutes to sync with our Tyrant every time, because the health pool that Felguard has is massive when it comes to demonic consumption bonus damage. So now keep in mind here, these are template characters. We have 6% haste right now. It'll be a lot higher when you hit 60 and even get relatively geared and properly itemized, depending on what you want. But Rotationally, this is mostly what I've been following. Opening on a precast Demon Bolt, right into Grimoire Felguard, Vile Fiend, well, Zerking here because why not, but normally I'll hold it. Call Dreadstalkers, and then I'll build to 4 or 5 shards. Now, I'll build the 4 here at a time. You can see my actual pet durations here, right? We'll go hand, and watch my Tyrant cast here. First of all, Vile Fiend is not extended. It's still going to expire. It's bugged. And then I go hand to Ghoul, Demonic Strength, and a few other hands, depending on what's going on. And for the most part, I mean, that opener allows you, it gives you 2 Dreadstalkers, your Grimoire Felguard, your Vile Fiend, and 4 Imps for your Tyrant. Now, with a higher level of haste, we certainly could squeeze in other Shadow Bolt for 1 more Shard, 1 more Imp for a hand of Gul'dan. But for the most part, this has led to some pretty decent Demonic Consumption, Demonic Tyrant, Demon Fire openers. Like I said, higher levels of haste will fuel more pets, and also playing the potential like double Hand of Gul'dan, double Imp Legendary also will fuel larger Tyrants. But for the most part, it's outside of that, it's Builder Spender rotation like we have on live, summon your Vile Fiend, your second one on CD. Seeing as how it is a 45-second cooldown, it should normally pair with your second Demonic Tyrant. At that point, it's Builder Spender. You cast it, like, bare minimum. You build 3 shards, cast Hand of Gul'dan. You're called Dreadstalkers, you cast on CD. You can see there we had a Demonic Calling proc, and just go from there. Now, you do see Demonic Strength comes off CD here, which is also awkward at a minute versus a minute and a half on our Tyrant. And you can see also a bit of a desync between our Grimoire Felguard and our Tyrant here. So, overall, rotationally, it feels similar to BFA, but playing Grimoire Felguard and Vile Fiend does change things up a bit rotationally in the opener, and really is mainly just based off of how Demonic Consumption currently works in Shadowlands. Now, one important thing that I really want to touch on here as far as Demonology pet utility is concerned, I think you guys can probably already figure it out because I have my pet page up. That is Axe Toss. So, Axe Toss says the Felguard hurls his weapon, stunning or interrupting a target for 4 seconds. Now, this there was an interrupt added to Axe Toss, I believe, about a month ago, give or take a bit, in actual alpha. But the issue is, it's not an interrupt, really. Axe Toss currently, for the most part, only interrupts mobs, bosses. The way this works is that the target, from what I understand, that it's written almost like in ancient hieroglyphics. It's hard to decipher how it works and doesn't. But what we can all tell is that the mob has to be stun immune. And if that's the case, Axe Toss will then interrupt the mob, which is partially why it works so well on bosses. People are citing that Axe Toss is more or less only a boss interrupt. The thing is that I've used this example a million times. A good friend of mine not used the same example in his Demonology article on Wowhead. That doesn't work in Mythic Plus. Yes, it might work in raids if you need to interrupt here and there, and great. If it works on bosses in Mythic Plus, that's awesome. But bosses aren't the majority of what Mythic Plus is made of. Yes, there's Tyrannical and there's Fortified, unfortunately, still, but Mythic Plus is a lot of it is trash. Min-maxing, optimizing how much trash you can pull. You need to have that guaranteed interrupt whenever you make those pulls. The example I was going to give, the Sky Screamers in a Tall Lazar, the ones that cast Terrifying Screech, those you cannot Axe Toss. Technically you can, it will stun them, but they will go to recast that Terrifying Screech after the stun is over. So technically you could stun them over and over and over when they first start casting that Screech, but they're going to recast it every time the stun finishes. You've seen it happen a lot in Mythic Plus, say when someone tries to stun the whole pack with the Saurids being in there, and the tank or somebody goes to also interrupt the Sky Screamer. It puts their interrupt on CD, but the Screamer will recast after the stun is over. You can't have that unreliability in Mythic Plus. As far as Demonology goes, it is the only DPS base spec in the game without a baseline interrupt, and this does not constitute that. You need to have that guaranteed interrupt. Okay, you're fourth in the rotation, there's the cast, you interrupt it, you move on. Having Axe Toss in this current form doesn't... it's good to see that Blizzard has seen and acknowledged the feedback it's been given about Demonology not having an interrupt. I truly feel that it is the third or fourth best, Destro and Demo are very close, range DPS spec in BFA, on live right now, outside of BM Hunter and Fire Mage, as far as pure damage goes. The damage profile is insane, but we're not brought to groups partially due to our lack of utility, both being... not having a reliable form of CC. Yes, we have Banish, but Banish works on 1 out of 85 mobs in Mythic Plus, so it's not like Hex, it's not like Sheep. We don't have that, and fear doesn't work because you pull 9/10 of the dungeon when you fear a mob. So, and not having an interrupt. That is the reason why, and that will not change. Demonology will still not be brought to keys because of that reason in Mythic Plus and Shadowlands if Axe Toss remains this way. I personally feel the best change to make, or to be made, if they want to keep Axe Toss as our baseline interrupt. If they want to keep it baked into this, all you do is make Axe Toss interrupt before it stuns. The way it works, if a mob is casting a spell and you cast Axe Toss, it checks if it's casting a spell that is interruptible. If it is, it interrupts. It does not stun, you move on. If it's casting a spell that's not interruptible, it checks. It's casting a spell. Yes. Is it interruptible? No. Okay. It stuns. You move on. And obviously, if it's not casting a spell and you cast Axe Toss, it just stuns. Look at the mobs in Motherlode. The assassins with Toxic Blades. You can interrupt those cast, and they won't recast. Which is why having that stun part of Axe Toss, as well as the interrupt part of Axe Toss being separate, is a big thing. Having it interrupt before it stuns essentially fixes all of these issues. I feel, at least. Now, realistically, I feel the best idea is quite literally just to go like this. Hey, here, pull up Demo Lock's PvP talents in a spellbook and go like this. Call Fellhunter. Drag it over into the spellbook. It quite literally is the interrupt we need. It is literally perfect. You cannot make a better interrupt for Demonology Warlocks. It fits the spell thematically. It's a 24-second CD versus a 30-second CD, and you don't have this weird, like, convoluted overlap of Axe Toss being both. It was given this. Making Axe Toss an interrupt and stun was suggested a million times to me before the change was even made, like on YouTube, on Twitch, but I don't like it. It just muddies the waters. It makes a utility ability, Axe Toss, because Destro and AF don't have that single target ability, convoluted. We lose that utility. So what I feel personally, if you want to stick with Axe Toss, you make it interrupt before it stuns. There you go. You have that guaranteed interrupt on trash, bosses, and you're good. If you want to go back to Axe Toss being a stun, you go like this. Bam, bam, done. Give us Call Fellhunter. There you go. Perfect. So as far as Demonology goes bug-wise, there are a few subtle things that I have mostly reported on beta. Pets falling through the 3rd and 4th boss floor, a necrotic wake, things like that. But there are two big bugs that, I mean, there are probably more, let's be real here, but there are two that I've seen rotationally that need to be addressed for Demonology. There's a recent one that appeared in, I believe, the last beta build. Summon Vile Fiend is not being extended by our Demonic Tyrant. I'm not going to cast it now because I'm going to show you the second bug here, but you can see when I cast my Vile Fiend in this rotational opener here that it's not being extended. The main bug, and this is not even just a bug, this is like the main issue with Demonology in Shadowlands right now, is that it uses a totem tracking system of sorts for pets, which is sort of what I talked about in my last video, talking about just, Warlock changes over the last week or so. So I'm going to watch under my character pane right here. I'm going to cast Call Dreadstalkers, which will account for 2 totems in a sense. Dreadstalkers, there's 2. Now, this tracks up to a total of 4 totems, meaning you can go Dreadstalkers for 2, Vile Fiend, and Grimoire Felguard, and that will be 4 totems total. Now, an issue that was present in the early stages of Alpha was that your Demonic Tyrant also counts as a totem. So what we had happening was you would cast your Demonic Tyrant and it would despawn one of your pets because it caps out at 4 totems. Now, I feel like this is sort of an odd way to track pets. A decent solution would probably just be make them buffs, but I mean, there's a million ways you could fix this, right? The issue we have now, though, is that with Demonic Consumption being altered to be sort of like a hybrid Thou Chaos consumption, you're looking to have a max amount of pets out. On live, you don't have this issue because look, wild imps don't take up slots here. There's no imps here. They remove them. I think they counted at some point in BFA, but they removed them from the totem tracking system here. Imps don't count. But when you have the opener of Call Dreadstalkers into Vile Fiend, Felguard, Tyrant, and then you cast another set of Called Dreadstalkers before the first set expires, you get in this weird range where it starts despawning other pets. It's despawned Vile Fiends. It despawns your Tyrant, which is massive because Demonic Consumption is a cooldown. It is quite literally broken. The spec doesn't function properly because of this bug and the way that Demonic Consumption has pushed us towards trying to maximize the amount of pets we have out. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'm going to cast my... I'll just get rid of my actual Felguard to make it easier so you guys can see it all, and I'll hit this thing. I'm going to cast my Call Dreadstalkers. Here we go. We're going to build the 5 shards. Oh, sorry, that's a hand cooldown. But we'll cast Call Dreadstalkers here when I get 2 shards. Perfect. There we go. Dogs. So we have 2 dogs here. Disregard the imps. We have 2 dogs, right? We're going to build the 5 shards here, watching the timer on these 2. We're going to go Tyrant now. Now we go Felguard. Look at the Tyrant here. Vile Fiend. And the Vile Fiend's here. He jumps in. But watch us cast Dreadstalkers here. Watch this. Bam. My Tyrant despawns. And one of my dogs is dead on the floor. You can see his tail right there. But he's still active. Well, he should be active, but it doesn't work that way. The Tyrant despawned before he finished his Demon Fire cast. He had 5 casts there. He normally gets off a lot more than that. He despawned early, and it also killed one of my dogs there. Now, that might not be the exact opener you follow. Things, sequencing-wise, it's a little different, but I wanted to do that because it displays the actual issues of this totem tracking system the best. Now, I mean, there's a million ways this could be addressed. In the end, I don't know how Blizzard tracks pets with totems and things a whole lot, but you could quite literally make it track 8 totems. You can make them buffs. You could probably just make it work the way imps are not tracked with totems, but as a whole, this is the main issue with Demonology that needs to be addressed. The Tyrant despawning had not been an issue for a few builds, but it came back in this most recent build, and it's a massive one. It is our #1 damage contributing ability. It had half its cast here or so, and it's still ahead of everything else by a few percent. It's massive. This means that essentially Demonology as a whole is not a functioning spec right now. Now you can sort of play around this by not casting your second set of Dreadstalkers during your Tyrant, but then you're losing damage and you're losing demonic core procs and things. It just needs to be addressed. Now that and the Summon Vile Fiend not being extended bug, which you probably saw there, I imagine this will be addressed at some point. But it's important to bring and draw attention to this being an issue because demonic consumption is our most powerful talent in this row in mostly every scenario at this point, I feel. Thanks for watching, though, guys. With that pretty much concludes my Shadowlands Beta Demonology Warlock overview at this point. I hope you guys found it useful. As mentioned, I wanted to make Demonology first because I feel that Destruction and Affliction are in pretty good spots right now, rotationally, toolkit-wise. I want to drive home the point that this is early beta. We had the first week of raid testing was last week. So numerically, tuning really hasn't happened. There might be a bit here and there, but over the next few weeks, when we have all 8 dungeons opened up for Mythic Plus and raid testing really gets amped up, with conduits coming out, that's when you'll really start to see other things start happening, tuning-wise, numbers-wise, everything else. So it's important to keep that in mind when looking at damage profiles, or just damage in general, in Shadowlands right now, that things aren't really tuned. But I can say that Demonology, single target damage-wise, is in a good spot. Even stat cleave-wise, that's more or less just what Demonology's damage profile and toolkit has always brought to whatever you're doing. If you're looking to play Demonology on a spread 2-target fight or a council-based fight like Hellfire High Council in HFC, well, you're probably playing the wrong spec, but hey, you know, it is what it is. So any questions, boys, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I'll be sure to get back to you. And let me know what you guys think about Demonology currently in Shadowlands. I believe for the most part, I hit on the biggest points of contention and everything people have been having right now, the big interest points and things. So let me know what you guys think below. Once again, all my Week Auras profiles and add-ons are there available to you guys for free on my Twitch. If you want to swing by, grab them, feel free to drop a follow or hang out anytime. I'm also happy to answer questions there if you may have them. If you guys enjoyed the video and or want to see my Destro and AF videos, which I'm going to be putting out in a pretty similar fashion over the next week and a half or so, feel free to smash the subscribe button below. It helps out a lot. And I will see you guys all again soon. Peace.